I'm not comparing myself to Mel Brooks. He's a legendary figure, but he as I like Mel Brooks, believe in using humor in horrible situations. It's just a thing people do. So we're gonna play a little game. Uh, we're gonna go back and forth. I'll go first, and we're gonna say if we were the headline writer and writing about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, what are ways we would be inclined to identify him before we got to Maryland Man? Okay, what are things we would say about him in a headline to describe him before we go to Maryland Man? So I'll go first. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, your turn.
Accused human trafficker and illegal border crosser and accused domestic violence.
All right, you did three. You did three, so I'll need.
I did three. Sorry.
That's okay. I'll need to do three to catch up. El Salvador citizen, right? El Salvadoran.
Yours are nicely neutral.
Well, you took some of mine. He's accused of all things. Accused gang member, and today they said that the reason he was afraid, it's been said by his family that he was afraid to go back to El Salvador because he was afraid gangs would try to kill him. And today the U.S. government asserted that the reason he was afraid gangs would try to kill him is because he's been accused of trying to killing the mother of a gang member. So by that standard, the headline could be accused murderer. Again, I think accused murderer before I think Maryland Man. Maybe there's something wrong with me. All right. So just to finish up on the Maryland Man thing, number 3, please. There's some of the headlines and news alerts that caught my eye, thanks to my colleagues for curating them. Here's Bloomberg. Bloomberg. I used to work at Bloomberg. I don't think of Bloomberg as a crazy liberal place, but there we go. Maryland Man wrongly deported. I put wrongly deported before I'd put Maryland Man. He was wrongly deported according to the courts and American law. So there's one. Here, Apple News. Now, Apple News is typically some other organization, so I don't know that's Steve Jobs doing that. And then we have another one of these, right? And there Axios is on there too. And here's CNBC and New York Times and Wall Street Journal. And now the Journal doesn't say Maryland Man, but the Washington Post does. Wrongly deported. Again, my first instinct would not be wrongly deported. I'd put that about 5th, but anyway, so there's that. Now, here is a couple sound bites from the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who held a press conference today to talk about the return of Abrego Garcia to the U.S. to face justice. Number 4, please.
Abrego Garcia has landed in the United States to face justice. On May 21st, a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee returned a sealed indictment charging Abrego Garcia with alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling in violation of Title 8 U.S.C. 1324. We want to thank President Bukele for agreeing to return Abrego Garcia to the United States. Our government presented El Salvador with an arrest warrant, and they agreed to return him to our country. We're grateful to President Bukele for agreeing to return him to our country to face these very serious charges. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador. The grand jury found that over the past 9 years, Abrego Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. He was a smuggler of humans and children and women. He made over 100 trips, the grand jury found, smuggling people throughout our country, MS-13 members, violent gang terrorist organization members throughout our country.
So I remember when some pro-Nazi marchers wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, the home of some Holocaust survivors. There were people who defended their right to do that, and they said, this is the toughest case possible for the First Amendment, but we believe in the First Amendment. We defend their right to march in Skokie, Illinois. And that's very principled to say we're going to stand by a bedrock American principle, even when it's politically unpopular. Chris Van Hollen is back on Twitter, the Maryland senator, continuing to say that he wants to stake his belief in the due process rights of people in this country illegally around this gentleman, even in the face of what was announced today. Now, it's obviously bad politics. I don't know, anyone could argue it's good politics, but again, it's admirable for someone to say, I'm going to stand on principle, even if it's bad politics. But Ms. Rosen, is this a serious principle?
No.
Is there no,
I don't think he's standing on principle. I think he's covering his political, I won't use the expletive, rear end. He is now, he's made the mistake that unfortunately, I think a lot of Democrats, when the procedural case about Garcia first came to the public's attention, made, which is to valorize him as a folk hero, to use him as a cultural symbol of everything that was wrong about what the Trump administration was doing with its approach to immigration. And that was a mistake. I think what the procedural message, which is important, and I completely agree with you that he was wrong. The courts found him wrongfully deported, and he should have been returned and gone through a process. That's separate from whether or not he's a good man, a good Maryland man, a family man was the phrase that was used a lot when he first came to the public's attention. And that's actually where I think Van Hollen and we will see others do this as well. They will try to keep that narrative going, a sympathetic narrative. And I personally don't think that's a matter of principle. I think that's a political making effort on his part, which will likely fail.
Okay, thank you for that. Here's the Attorney General again. These are horrible charges, but this is what the United States is charging this Maryland man with. Number 5, please.
It's especially disturbing because Abrego Garcia is also alleged with transporting minor children. The defendant traded the innocence of minor children for profit. There are even more disturbing facts that the grand jury uncovered. It is alleged this defendant is part of the same smuggling ring responsible for the death of more than 50 migrants in 2021 after the tractor trailer overturned in Mexico. This is part of that same ring. The defendant abused undocumented alien females, according to co-conspirators who were under his control while transporting them throughout our country. This defendant trafficked firearms and narcotics throughout our country on multiple occasions. They were using vehicles, SUVs, with added seats in the back, floors that had been ripped out, guns, narcotics, children, women, MS-13 members. That is what the grand jury found. A co-conspirator alleged that the defendant solicited nude photographs and videos of a minor. A co-conspirator also alleges the defendant played a role in the murder of a rival gang member's mother. These facts demonstrate Abrego Garcia is a danger to our community. We want to thank the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, our state and local partners, our acting U.S. Attorney Robert McGuire, and prosecutors from the Joint Task Force Vulcan.
So, Christine, this is my last question on this. And again, if people want to get in on the conversation later about it, they can. So, I don't believe when the government says stuff. I don't just take it as on faith because governments lie. And maybe some of the things he's charged with he didn't do. But it's pretty clear from this indictment, and again, I say another throat-clearing moment, reporters don't have subpoena power, right? So the government often knows more than journalists can know. But how could it be, if that indictment's true or even partially true, how could it be that we've gone weeks with stories being written about him where they say it's unclear if he was a gang member, he was a contractor, he was a dad? How could it be that we've gone weeks without having knowledge of what was laid out in this indictment?
Well, I think if we look at how some of the major issues that weren't covered during the Biden administration, not only with regard to Biden himself and his administration, but to the problem of immigration, which we were told was under control, not a crisis, where active, efforts to suppress images from the border of the crisis were common. I think what we're seeing here is, again, part of a job of a journalist is to decide what to report. And in this case, I think you see dominant media, a lot of them, and I think the headlines you showed us earlier are a good example of this, in lockstep deciding to look the other way at things that might not suit a narrative that was sympathetic to Garcia. All over social media when he first became well known in the public's mind were little snippets of video that showed him being arrested or pulled over and perhaps trying to cover up some sort of trafficking. But this indictment, correct me if I'm wrong, by the grand jury came down May 21st. It's been
They're
around for a
sealed.
few weeks.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's not been any curiosity on the part of dominant media to ask exactly these questions, and that is a disservice to the public. It has allowed politicians who want to adopt a posture of moral grandstanding to fly down and visit him and have margaritas with him or whatever all this was, which of course they see as beneficial for their constituents. But it misleads the American public, and I think that that creates cynicism, and it's why we have a lot of mistrust in our media right now.
I agree with everything you said. But I'll just add one subsidiary question. The Daily Caller has done a lot of reporting on the Tennessee facts, but even the conservative press, which has the opposite inclination and motivation, even they did not really have this portrait that was presented today. It confuses me.
Yes,
If this guy's life was about trafficking, it seems like there should have been more to this. And again, I'd love to know the answer to this question. I don't know that we'll ever get it. If Chris Van Hollen had known all the allegations in this indictment before he flew to El Salvador, would he still have flown down there? Would they still be saying we are all Abrego Garcia if they knew this? I don't know. I'm somewhat rhetorical, but I'm just curious. Again, a two-part question, which I normally don't do. Why didn't the conservative media have this more of this? And second is, do you think now some Democrats at least will say that this is not the hill to die on?
To the second question first, I hope so. I hope savvy Democratic politicians, particularly those who are in districts that are more purple than blue, will understand that immigration remains a priority for American voters and will be reflected in both the midterm elections and the next presidential election. To the conservative media part, it is, I think, an infrastructure issue in some sense. Deep investigative reporting that takes months to accomplish requires people to be able to be sent at great expense to travel to the border, to find sources, to cultivate them. Takes time and institutional clout. And right now, a lot of the wonderful independent media that you see conservatives building are still in a kind of toddler phase in terms of their infrastructure. They do not have the resources to send a team of reporters, as an outlet like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post might be able to do, and a longtime team covering just that issue. So my hope is that 10 years from now, we won't have to ask that question, maybe even 5 years from now, but that will require the building of a more aggressive, thoughtful reporting infrastructure on the part of conservative media.
Great answer. All right, let's